Welcome, flight simmers. I thought I'd do a video on Prepar3D version 4. As many of you know, Lockheed Martin have been working on Prepar3D version 4 for some time. It's been fairly highly anticipated. So I thought I'd step through a late beta. There's been quite a few beta cycles of it, but I thought I'd go ahead and just step you through the installation or give you some details on Prepar3D version 4. By the time you get this video, the NDA non-disclosure agreement should be lifted, so everyone who's been on the beta team will be able to discuss the Prepar3D version 4. And this will bring you up to your familiar scenario screen. And you'll notice there'll be a few things arranged differently. You no longer have a background here. This is intentional. This is the way that Lockheed Martin wanted to do it because of some issues with other objects showing up that they didn't want to see. So familiar change airport, you've got your seasons, you've got your weather, nothing terribly new there. What you have nice though is you can go to your options screen here before you start the simulator. So we're going to go ahead and do that. And here are all your options. They're arranged a little bit differently, but I think you'll find they're very similar. So I'm going to turn pause on task switch off. I'm going to use the system time for default scenario, and I believe that's about all I'm going to do for that tab. For information, I don't like to see vehicle labels, so I turn that off. For primary, for text being displayed, I only like to see the single line in the top. Don't like parking brakes, turn these all off. Weapons, system, stall, pause, brakes, all off. Anything else he's changing here? I'm not going to be using air traffic control. I just turn that off. Sound, I'll need to make some adjustments here to match how my sound system is set up, but for now I'm just going to leave that at all default there. Traffic, I'm going to put about 20% airline traffic, maybe 30% general aviation, vehicle density medium. There are some changes with the road vehicle traffic, so I'm going to leave this at 25%. Ships and ferries, I'll leave that 25%. And leisure boats, go ahead and do the same, 25%. Oh, actually, I like a little bit more leisure boats. Let's bump those up to say 35%. These are the usual settings you're familiar with. I always do ignore crashes and damage. Engine stretching, I'll leave that on. Let me see anything else. Ignore weights, I like to uncheck these. Those are all set. Okay, let's go over to display. This is what probably most people are interested in. I don't, well, I should say I don't like FXAA. I do like FXAA, but in this particular case I'm going to turn it off because under AA we now have a couple of additional options here. You've got the standard multi-sample AAA, 2x, 4x, 8x, but now you have the super sample AA, 2x, 4x, 8x, and I like to use 4x on a 4K because produces probably the best performance to visual ratio, and it looks better than MSAA. Texture filtering, Anisotropic 16x is my preferred. Here I'm going to go to 4096 by 4096 for the ultra texture size. And since we're on that topic here, as you're probably well aware, Prepar3D version 4 is 64-bit. So let's just go bring up Explorer here and verify that that's the case. And if you go down to Prepar3D here, but you should be able to do a properties on this, and let me see. Yep, and there it is. Sure enough, image 64-bit. Let's go ahead. Let's go back to our settings here. That's my GPU is a single 10x Pascal. That's my resolution, which is 4K. I'll leave these alone. VSync I want on. Triple buffer I want on. And I want this set to unlimited. Bear in mind that my monitor is set to 30 Hertz refresh. So setting this to unlimited and having VSync on will essentially lock my frame rate to 30 frames per second. And that's easier to sustain in many situations. That's why I run my monitor at 30 Hertz. Alright, moving on to the world. The level of detail radius, I'm going to warn you here, has changed. Max now, your level of detail will probably go out quite a bit further. There are some additional settings which I will get into later. Tessellation, yes, I want that max. Mesh resolution. Actually 1 meter tends to work better. And I'll explain that later too. I usually had it at 5, and that was primarily because of Orbic's recommendation, but I found that 1 meter actually works better at elevation changes than 5 meters. Texture resolution, we want to max that to 7. This is use high resolution terrain textures. You definitely want that on. Now be aware, all these settings here are going to use lots of GPU VRAM. Scenery complexity, let's go ahead and max all these out. With the autogen, vegetation and building density, these extreme settings are now considerably further out than they were in version 3 of Prepar3D. They're pretty much all the way out to the horizon. So you'll see autogen just about as far as you possibly can see. It does add a little bit of a load, but surprisingly not as much as I thought it would. Coming down to the dynamic 3D vegetation. This is definitely a performance. I don't want to say a performance killer because it's not, but you'll definitely experience about 13 to 17% frame rate hit if you have the dynamic 3D autogen vegetation enabled. And what is dynamic 3D autogen vegetation? Those are essentially what they call speed trees. Prepar3D version 4, now you can fill your entire world with nothing but the speed trees. Not just speed trees around the airport, but the entire planet will now have dynamic 3D autogen vegetation. For those of you familiar with speed trees are trees that move with the wind. As the wind increases, they move around more. They have far more detail than the X trees that we're used to, which is basically just two planes and an X. That was what we're used to as far as trees. The speed trees have a lot more volume to them, but as a result, they do come with a bit of a performance penalty. So you can expect anywhere from around 13 to 20% frame rate hit. That'll vary, of course, depending on your GPU and how much VRAM you've got and your CPU. So be warned, this does have some performance implications with it. Water detail, ultra. Bathroom, I don't think anybody uses that, so I'm not going to enable that. I don't like cloud reflections on the water myself. These are all personal preference, so go to town and do whatever you enjoy doing. I like terrain reflections, user vehicle reflections, and I do like building reflections. That seems a bit more realistic to me. Okay, let's go ahead. Special effects, yeah, max those out. Alright, so everything's almost maxed out here. Let's move over to lighting. This is all going to be personal preference. I like HDR. I'm going to turn this down. Oops, I'm going to turn this down to about 85. And again, that's just personal preference. You can do whatever you like. I don't like too much bloom, so I'm going to turn that down to about 85 also. Saturation seems about right to me at 80. Dynamic reflections, this is the same setting that you're used to in version 3. This is reflections on surfaces, including aircraft, buildings, that will reflect either in water or reflect on your aircraft, or you name it, wherever the reflections are set up. This does require support from the third-party developer. They need to not use the global maps, use the specific ones. And not all third-party developers do that. In fact, very few actually are using reflection maps. Dynamic lighting. This is the new one. This is lighting that a lot of people have been waiting for. Don't expect this to be like X-Plane 11 lighting. It's not yet, and I say yet because they're only currently active dynamic lighting is coming from aircraft. There's no scenery. Well, I'll take that back. There are some third-party sceneries that have enabled dynamic lighting a different way, and those do actually work in version 4, but they need some tweaking and adjustments to work correctly. The big thing here is dynamic lighting. You now have volumetric lighting, so when you light things up, you can light up buildings, trees, anything with the aircraft. If you're designing scenery, you can set up an airport that has real lights that do real volumetric lights. So when your aircraft goes to the jetway and the jetway's lit up, your aircraft will get lit up as well. And there's no real limit. I mean, you could do runway lights, you could do car lights, parking lot lights, you name it. You can have true volumetric lights now. There is a cap on how many dynamic lights will render per scene. The cap seemed a bit arbitrary to me, but Lockheed decided to make the cap at around, I think, 500 dynamic lights. Now, I'm not really sure if that's the entire scene, so that would take into account aircraft, other vehicles, anything that's in the scene. Now, is 500 lights, dynamic lights, enough? I don't know. I'm going to guess probably yes, but from what I've heard from LM is that anything above 500 lights, and it'll just turn your system into a slideshow. So that's why they put the cap at 500. Alright, so moving on to landing lights, emulate ground. Yes, that's the standard settings as before. Display lens for area, you've all seen those before. Shadow quality, I'm going to turn up to ultra. Shadow distance, I'm going to max out also. I like to see sim objects. I also like to see them receive. But if you don't want to do the receive, you can turn that off because it can be quite a bit of a strain. I like to see buildings, and I like to see the clouds and terrain. And there's a new one here called particles. I haven't actually experimented with this that much. I'm not really sure why you'd want shadows on particles. Maybe cloud smoke. But that's the additional shadow setting. Later on I'll go into how you can actually go beyond ultra here and actually get higher quality shadows. But for now, let's just stick with the basics. Let's do everything from the UI perspective. I'm going to leave these alone for now, since we don't, since there isn't a working hi-fi simulations, or there isn't a working third-party weather engine yet. There may be on release day, I don't know. But for now, I haven't seen a working one, but that doesn't mean it won't exist. And I think that's about it for that display settings. So let's go ahead and hit OK. Or actually, let's go back to Where is it? Display, and I'm going to save these as, I'll just call them GA Extreme. And hit OK. Alright, so now we've defined our graphic setting before we've actually gone into the simulator. So I'll put this on cold fronts, I think. I'm going to go into the simulator now and actually set this to spring. And this is the default kVps. And we'll go ahead and hit OK. And this is going to load up simulator. Alright, so let's go ahead and hit the OK and see what we get. Don't worry about it if you get to this loading screen and it sits at 100% for a little bit. On the first start, for some reason, I'm not really sure why that happens. It's probably just building a lot of indexes and a lot of other configuration files. The initial loading seems much longer than other loadings. So don't panic. Just hang on and wait while it's at its 100%. Alright, so we got our initial load here. I'm going to go ahead and go full screen. It's a little loud, so what I'm going to do is change the sounds. And where's the general? Sound. So I'm going to knock these down a bit because that's, to me, is a bit loud. Alright, that's a little bit better. And here we are. We can actually import our controls from version 3. If you notice, the screen's a little bit different here. We've got key assignments and access and calibration on the side here. It provides the basic same layout, just organized slightly differently than version 3. But more importantly, you can go ahead and go import, and you can go to version 3 files, and you can import your version 3 settings. Voila. Now, after you do the import, is important thing to remember is that you'll need to do your calibrations for all your devices again. And you also want to check their sensitivities. I recommend you always increase your device to maximum sensitivity, minimum null zone. Oops, wrong button. Okay, and same for my my throttle controller here. And let's do the yoke. So after you do your import, you want to reset all these sensitivities and null zones. And have we done the game controller? Yep. Alright, so yep, we got that going. Okay. So now go ahead and do calibrate device on each device. Again, this is required when after you import a file or import your old controllers. So I'm going to go ahead and do calibrate here. I don't need to set anything because it's already been reset, so let me move my rotors back and forth. Toe brake, toe brake, toe brake, toe brake, and then save, and do it for the next one. PC game controller, calibrate. This is my actual flight stick. Alright, and save. Process for my throttles. hit save. And then go ahead and do it for my yoke. And then hit save. So once you've got your devices calibrated, you might want to just check, make sure your access Cs are working correctly. PC game controller. And in this case, I actually don't want spoiler access, so I'm going to delete that. That sounds like a kitty cat. Alright, so spoiler access is gone. And I think... So now everything should be set up for trim. And we should be good to fly. Let me check my throttles here. Okay, they appear to be working correctly. Yeah, rotor's working good.